Ok, pues es un verdadero gusto estar el día de hoy con todas y todos ustedes. Estamos muy agradecidos de que puedan acompañarnos. Yo soy Jorge Armijo, secretario ejecutivo del programa de jóvenes COMEXI, y realmente agradezco enormemente el interés por crear mayores espacios para la colaboración entre los jóvenes, las voces jóvenes, con actores de la mayor relevancia, como es la Arizona State University y, por supuesto, la Arizona Mexico Commission. Dado que es un evento binacional, voy a dar un breve comentario en inglés, sin antes agradecer, por supuesto, a Andrés por el apoyo, a Mía por la oportunidad y, por supuesto, a Axel y a Mariana por hacer posible este evento y, evidentemente, a nuestros panelistas que nos acompañan el día de hoy. I think that this issue is greatest relevance for Mexico and the United States. Uh, as we all know, the bilateral relationships go beyond political and economic issues. And of course, the sport field is a central element for North America. Here in Mexico, all people know very well the American sports. And of course, this topic help us to reach another kind of channels to study the bilateral relationship between Mexico, United States, and also with Canada. This happens through public diplomacy, for example, a means to bring both societies even closer. And I think this webinar is going to be a very important space for share ideas and knowledge about the bilateral relations between Mexico and United States. And from the sports diplomacy perspective, I think this will be a different kind of discussion, thinking that all the debate usually is focused on political and economic issues. So this is a greatest opportunity for us from the Young Professionals Program. We are very excited, and I hope this will be a very useful discussion. Thank you so much, Mia. I will give you the floor, and I will be very interested on this conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Para nosotros en Convergence Lab y Arizona State University siempre es un honor colaborar con ustedes en PJCOMEXI y también con la Arizona Mexico Commission, que son organizaciones que comparten nuestro objetivo de crear espacios de convergencia y de explorar los retos y las oportunidades que tenemos en común. Ahora voy a cambiar al inglés y la mayoría de la conversación será así, pero si quieren escucharla en español, hay una opción para interpretación simultánea en la parte inferior de sus pantallas. Entonces, nada más tienen que dar clic ahí y ya van a empezar a escuchar el español. So as you know, today we'll be talking about sport in the binational relationship. And as Jorge mentioned, when we talk about sport in the binational relationship, we're really talking about business and culture and social issues and communities, and these days, in particular, resilience. And to guide us through those topics and the ways that they overlap, we're really lucky to have with us Mariana Rafael, who's a young associate with COMEXI, where she's collaborated on several projects related to the U.S. Mexico relationship and the prosperity of the North American region. Mariana is a public affairs advisor and has experience working with different sectors such as telecom, logistics, and healthcare, and organizations such as the Inter-American Development Bank. Mariana is joined by Andres Martinez, a professor of practice at ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, and a global sports scholar at ASU's Global Sport Institute. Andres serves on the boards of directors of the U.S. Mexico Foundation and the Arizona Mexico Commission, and is a special advisor to ASU President Michael Crow, and he's currently working on a book project focused on sport and globalization. As panelists, we have with us Derek Hall, President and CEO of the Arizona Diamondbacks, who also serves on the Arizona Mexico Commission's Board of Directors. And prior to the pandemic, the Diamondbacks were scheduled to play the first ever Major League regular season game in Mexico City. And last February, Derek met with Mexican president and avid baseball fan Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. So Derek, you'll have to tell us if you were able to convince him to swear allegiance to the Diamondbacks. Derek is joined by Kevin Demoff, the COO of the Los Angeles Rams. Since joining the Rams in 2009, Kevin has been responsible for reorganizing the club's business efforts with a focus on delivering a better overall experience for Rams fans and increasing the club's presence in the community, including in Mexico. Ahead of the team's planned 2018 game in Mexico City, Kevin said the country feels like home for the Rams. And finally, we have Jason Rowley, the president and CEO of the Phoenix Suns. Throughout his 9 seasons leading the team, Jason has focused on deepening the Suns' connections with Mexico in the border region and beyond, which has included the team playing 6 games in the country, 3 of them regular season. And I think that the first game that the team actually played in Mexico was in 1996. Jason, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but the Suns have a long history of playing in Mexico. And Jason has said that the team's ultimate goal is to become the NBA team for Mexico, which I think is perhaps a goal of many of the leaders that we have today. And so we actually wanted to involve you all as participants to give Derek, Kevin, and Jason advice throughout the conversation of how they might be able to convert their teams into the most popular teams in their respective leagues in Mexico. So we asked some of you to share your thoughts on that in the registration process, but we just want to ask you to continue sending your recommendations and your questions through the Q&A box throughout the course of the conversation. And at the end of the conversation, we'll bring some of those up and discuss them more. And Axel Cabrera, who is a board member of PJCOMEXI, will be helping me take a look at what you send us through the Q&A box. So in line with that and wanting to engage you all as audience members more, we're actually going to kick off the conversation with a quick poll. So those of you who are joining us on Zoom should be able to see a poll here on your screen. So the question is, which US league do you follow most? NFL, NBA, MLB, or other? So I'm going to give you all about 5 more seconds to vote.
That's no fair. We can't vote. The panelists can't vote.
That's sorry about that. It's
disenfranchised.
Voter disenfranchisement. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And we'll share the results here. Okay, so we can see Kevin has a big edge here. The NFL.
I voted many times.
Okay, we may have some voter fraud on the part of the panelists, but I think Jason and Derek may be able to convince some of you by the end of the conversation. So we'll see. And then finally, we're gonna do one more poll here. All right, so this question, what do you think will happen first? The NFL will have a team based in Mexico, the MLB will have a team based in Mexico, the NBA will have a team based in Mexico, or the 2 countries' professional soccer leagues will merge into one? All right, so I'll give you all about 5 more seconds to get in your votes if you haven't already. It's fairly close, so every vote counts. All right. So we can see the winner here is the MLB with 35%. And then we have the 2 countries' professional soccer leagues will merge into one with 27%, and then the NFL and the NBA. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to Andres. Andres, go ahead.
Thanks, Mia. That was really interesting. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm really excited to be doing this with COMEXI and with the Arizona Mexico Commission. At the outset, just a couple of framing words. I think it's important to stipulate that sport matters. I mean, that's why we're here. It obviously matters if you're a fan of a particular game, but it also matters beyond the field of play. You know, when you think about it, sport is the most important form of live entertainment. And unlike so many other things in life these days, it's a form of entertainment that we share simultaneously these days. It's a form of global popular culture that situates us in the world, that helps bring people together. It gives us another language, a different way of connecting, as Jorge was alluding to at the outset. I know as a kid growing up in Mexico, I learned so much about the world by following sport. I learned there were a couple of big cities in Ohio because they happened to be in the same division as my beloved Acereros de Pittsburgh. I learned about places like Munich and Barcelona by following watching the other football. And I remember as a really little kid watching a World Cup and finding myself watching Germany playing against Germany. And my dad had to come in and sort me out and explain to me that the Federal Republic was the good Germany and not the democratic one. So that was like my intro into the Cold War. So as all of you PJCOMEXI experts in international relations already know, sport is a very important way for nations and cities and regions to project their soft power to the world. Why is Qatar so eager to host a World Cup? Why was Vladimir Putin so eager to do so? What did Mexico want to tell the world about itself by hosting back-to-back an Olympics in '68 and a World Cup in 1970? Speaking of that World Cup, I can't recommend enough the new Netflix documentary on Pele, which is really speaks to this power of sport in terms of looking at how that dazzling Brazil team kind of forged a nation's entire identity, peaking at that World Cup. Sports is obviously hugely important also for commercial brands, as we're reminded every year during the Super Bowl time just recently, and important to social causes, as we saw during the debates around Black Lives Matter in the previous year, and its connection to sport. This semester I'm teaching a course at ASU on sport and globalization, thanks to a lot of support from our Global Sport Institute. And one of the things we're exploring is how the globalization of sport seems to only accelerate, while sport in the political sphere and in other aspects of economic life seems to be stalling. So bringing it back to our neck of the woods, we all know how closely bound together Mexico and the U.S. are, with our shared border, our shared history, our shared culture, and even I would say our shared games. We are two countries with one fan base. If you walk around Phoenix or LA, you're going to see as many people wearing Chivas de Guadalajara and Club America gear as you're going to see folks wearing, Chicago Bulls, LA Dodgers, Dallas Cowboy gear walking around Mexico City. So I'm really excited as an academic who can theorize about all this stuff in the abstract, I'm really excited the opportunity to talk to three leaders of border state teams who are actually doing this, right? Trying to expand the reach of their games, of their sport franchises. We have with us the three most important pro sports leagues in the US. All three of you represent tremendously impressive organizations, impressive both at playing the sport that you're in at the highest level, but also at building community, building a brand, and delivering a phenomenal experience to your followers, no matter where your followers are, and crucially for the purpose of today's conversation, your followers in Mexico. So that's just kind of how I think about this topic and why I was so excited to have this opportunity to talk to you all. And now let's go ahead and get in it. And Derek, let me start with you as a fellow Arizona Mexico Commission board member. And also, Arizona and Sonora, our neighboring state across the border, are, if I say Mexico and the US are close, Sonora and Arizona are just intimate. That's a very special relationship. And part of what binds the two states is a shared passion for baseball. Whatever the poll showed, we know that in that part of Mexico, there is nothing that comes second to baseball. And so, an opening question for you is, how do you and the Diamondbacks think of Mexico as a market, both for fans, but also for athletic talent?
Yeah, and thanks, Andres, and thank you for having me and having us as part of this this panel. And I'll tell you, it's very important to us when we look at Mexico, and like you said, in particular, Sonora. Sonora is really our sister, and we think it's an extension of our fan base and of our geography. When we look at how we can market Mexico, we really start there in our own backyard. We have so many fans from Hermosillo and from Sonora that come up to our games. They come in busloads for weekends, and literally on buses that have been organized, and some have been weekend season ticket holders in the past. And we do the same going down there and seeing their games in Hermosillo with the Naranjeros, who are very good friends of ours, Enrique Mason and the Mason family. But it's very important that we reciprocate as much as we can. We've been promoting our sport and our team, our franchise in Sonora for years. We've actually had ticket outlets there. We've been down there as part of clinics and camps and tournaments, supporting the community as much as we can there as well. So a lot of our initiatives that we have here, we also do there as well. We have actually visited Mexico, and I would say 15 times in the last 3 years in small groups of former players and executives and broadcasters. But we've also played there more than any team in Major League Baseball. This year, as Mia had mentioned, we were going to play the first ever regular season game there. Andres, that would have been our 12th game organized there in Mexico, and no other team has come even close to that. So we not only want to plant our flag there to show our support of Mexico and of all the fans that we have there, but we understand the importance of our sport in that country, not only in our region here and in our sister state, our sister city with Hermosillo, but throughout all of Mexico. And we've had the fortune and blessing of now playing in, like we did in Monterrey with our exhibition game against the Rockies. And I'll say one other thing, when we go play somewhere, it's not just a matter of showing up for the game. We really invest in that country. For example, we opened up against the Dodgers a few years back in Australia, and it was a bit strange for us to go down to Australia and play there. But having done so, we spent an entire year going there and getting to know the leaders and getting to know the community and giving back for that year and doing as many interviews as we could possible to let them know who we are and let them know that we wanted them to be fans. And to this day, we still have so many fans in Australia, but that's the same approach that we have always had in Mexico as well. When we go and we play, whether it is in Monterrey or if it's in Hermosillo, it's not just show up and play that game and leave. It's go there beforehand and invite people to come to the games there and tell them why they're so important to us. And vice versa, invite them to our games. And when they come to our games, they have to feel comfortable and welcome and want to come back. So we really had to change our entire approach. And it's really from a Hispanic marketing standpoint as well, to make sure that you have game day magazines in Spanish language as well, to make sure that your signage and your wayfinding is in Spanish, that you have PA announcements pregame and postgame in Spanish, that it is a welcome feeling and that we want them to be there. But it's very important. It's vital for us to have a fan base extended into Sonora and really all of Mexico.
So you mentioned the relationship with this team, the Naranjeros. How formalized are the relationships that you have with them? And are there comparable tie-ins between Major League Baseball teams and Mexican counterparts to sort of have like pathways for talented players is this sort of like a farm league system, or is it more informal than that?
It's much more informal. In the past, it used to be much more formal than that, where you would actually have an agreement or a contract with a team and you could exchange players. Today, it's more of a friendly relationship that we have with them. And of course, they've got winter ball rosters that they have to fill out, and we'll help them with players on the roster, some up and coming minor league players, and they'll come and ask us our opinion. We'll scout together. We share best practices as much as possible, but it's not just the team in Hermosillo. Now it's the entire Liga, Liga Mexicana del Pacifico. And, we've really extended to all those teams to make sure that we could also share best practices with all of them. So we will sit down with each of the teams and tell them what we do from a marketing standpoint and how we sell tickets and what it's looking like technologically and how the game is changing. They'll do the same with us. And then we invite them up for one game where we invite all of the teams to have a presence in the stadium, to actually have a booth and market their team with their calendar and tickets and their schedule and promotions. And we'll have all of their mascots up, which are such a big part of their experience. And that actually in 2019, I think we've done it now 3 years. 2019 was the last time we had fans, because in 2020 we did not. But that game where we had Liga there and the Mexican League and all the teams there represented, and we also had all of the mascots, and we had a lot of entertainment and promotions. Yeah. That was our largest single game attendance ever in the history of Chase Field, over 50,000. And it's because of the excitement for that league and for baseball in general throughout Mexico and here in the States.
Interesting. Jason, let me shift over to Los Suns. And I'm not just being I'm not making that up for those of you in the audience who don't know. The Suns, as Mia mentioned at the outset, have a pretty long history now of engaging with Mexico, but even in our local Arizona market of really having this branding as Los Suns and reaching out to the local Latino community. And obviously there's a lot of overlap there. One of the things that surprised me, Jason, in that poll was how people don't seem to think that an NBA team based in Mexico is going to happen before some of the other options. Right. And obviously there are logistical hurdles to all of them, but I would have thought maybe if I had been allowed to vote, I might have voted for the NBA in Mexico. Is that something that you think is in the foreseeable future of a league like the NBA, which does seem to have a very aggressive global focus, of having a team based in Mexico City playing in the NBA?
And Andres, thanks for having me, and everybody. Appreciate having the opportunity. A couple things. First of all, we actually, to some degree, do have a professional team. The Capitanes in Mexico City are going to be joining the G League. They were supposed to be joining it in 2000, actually this season. Obviously, with everything happening with the pandemic, there was a decision to put the brakes on that. But that's really the first entree of the NBA having a footprint on the team side. The NBA has had an office down there for many years, and just as Derek said, on the MLB side, the cross-border relations and building out the connections between the Mexico market is an important thing for our team, but also for our league. And obviously for the border states, it's even more acute in terms of how important those relationships are. But in terms of a team actually being down there, when I look at Mexico City in particular as a market, you look at putting my pure business hat on. You think about the sheer population, what the television market down there would look like, the amount of industry there, the businesses that are located there, and just how passionate the fan base is down there for the various sports they follow, including non-American football, just how excited they get about that. Certainly baseball and American football as well as basketball. You see all those ingredients and you recognize that that's a really ripe environment for a major league professional sports team to take a hold. And then you look at frankly, the practical things about running a season, which are travel times and distances and scheduling. And the fact is, I'd rather fly down to Mexico City than have to go back east and play a leg and a swing through Philly and New York and Florida. So from a practical standpoint, there's actually a lot of benefits there you could really see. Our reach as a league, really focusing on the international market. We've been very aggressive, obviously, in China. We've been very aggressive in India, been very aggressive in Mexico as well. And the globalization, as you spoke to, Andres, of sports in general, our world is shrinking and it's getting smaller. And so for our leagues across the board to be able to tap into new markets and expand maybe markets that we've had somewhat of a foothold in for a bit, but expanding them more, I think is just, it's good business. When I think about ourselves here locally, I really look at it in kind of three buckets. There's our own business objectives as an organization. There's economic development for our region and our state. And the fact of the matter is, at last count, I believe it was Arizona and Mexico is Arizona's largest trade partner. The last number I saw was like $8 billion a year was the annual trade. And it's probably even larger than that at this point. And then the community connection. So those three buckets, and you look at the Hispanic community here in the state of Arizona and in the Phoenix market, there's obviously so much interconnectivity to Mexico and across the border that it'd be foolish to not do what we can to try and strengthen those relations and build those connections.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's also in the back of my mind when you were talking about globalization that I believe that your ownership group has also invested in European soccer, and we don't need to get into that too much, but it's an interesting sign of how we're seeing this sort of expansion. But in terms of Mia's mention at the outset that you all have a pretty specific desire to be Mexico's team in the NBA, and this is a question for you that also at some point, Derek and Kevin, I want to hear you guys weigh in on is we're talking about your individual franchise strategies, and then you also have a league-wide strategy. And it might vary depending on which league we're talking about, but like in your case, how free are the Suns to go down and plant the flag on Mexico and make all sorts of commercial deals? Or do you kind of have to defer to the NBA league-wide strategy of how to advance this global role and maybe, and you have to sort of work through the league offices? Give us a sense of that.
That's a very astute question, because historically it's been that we have had to work essentially in conjunction with the league and really defer to the league. So anything out of our territory, which is the state of Arizona, from a marketing standpoint, is generally controlled by the NBA, and that's pretty consistent across the leagues. So for us to go down to Mexico, for example, everything we do has to be in conjunction with what the NBA is doing, and which has been fine. They've been terrific partners in that regard. And again, the NBA having an office down there has always been very helpful for us. But what has happened over the last couple of years is a recognition at the league level, and this doesn't just pertain to Mexico, it actually pertains more to international opportunities in general, that they have actually expanded the right of teams to go out and at least attract up to 3 international partners in whatever markets. And there are some constraints around that and some protections that the league retains for itself. But allowing those international opportunities to be taken advantage of at the team level, to me, was really a recognition by the league that sometimes the teams are maybe better off and better suited to make those connections themselves, because ultimately, yes, brands certainly want to associate with the leagues and the brands of the leagues, but at the end of the day, it's the teams and the players that are driving all this. That's where nobody's going to be a fan of the NBA if it wasn't for the Suns or the Spurs or the Knicks and the players that are playing for those teams, right? Otherwise, you don't really have a league to brand. So
right.
Having those kind of strings loosened a bit for us has been helpful. And as we've been pursuing those types of opportunities, an obvious place to look is companies down in Mexico, Bimbo, and some of the other ones that are big operations down there that also have a big reach here in the States. And so what we really look for is connectivity, not just an organization or a company that has business down in Mexico or one just in the state, but one that really has the connection between the two.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really helpful. Kevin, so we're gonna go to our neighboring state of California here, and also a border state, and LA is so many different things, but among different things, it is often spoken of as Mexico's second largest city, in addition to being a lot of other things. And so, do you have a sense of where the Rams stand in terms of the market share of NFL fandom in Mexico? Do you have a sense of where you rank?
Yeah, thanks, Andre. It's a pleasure getting to crash the Arizona party here and be part of it.
It's all in the Pac-12. I say that as an ASU guy.
Right. Like Derek, we had the similar misfortune of having a game scheduled and canceled in Mexico City. His was a global pandemic. Ours was due to Shakira. So I'm not sure that they're the same. But they follow that path. When we were in 2018, and similar to what Derek said about Diamondbacks in Australia, when you go to Mexico, we spent weeks there planning, meeting with local officials, meeting with Boys and Girls Clubs about how we could increase, our presence in Mexico and really become that team. And what you come to find out is, if you look at Mexican fandom, we were probably somewhere in the top 10, but closer to 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's true for Jason Derek. Proximity doesn't seem to be the driving force in fandom in Mexico. It's really visibility on television. Yeah. Right. And so if you actually look at NFL teams in terms of Mexican fan base, the Steelers, I believe, are the most popular team in Mexico. And a lot of that traces back to when games first went on television in Mexico in the 70s and 80s, they were the best team. Right. So historically, those teams that have won the most, that have been on television the most have a large fan base in Mexico. And in the NFL, we only play one game a year in Mexico. It is a very fought after game by teams to go there because everybody wants to go plant their flag, in Mexico and try to make that case to grow the fan base and to really bring those people into the fold. Obviously, we have a natural connection here in Los Angeles, given the relationship between the two. Very similar to what you guys have in Arizona. I serve on the Mex LA Commission, which is a partnership between Mexico and created by the mayor here in Los Angeles. The Cardinals have played many games, in Mexico as well. So it's a fought after thing. We would like to make it greater. Similar to Jason said, there are a ton of restrictions around what the NFL will and won't let us do from a commercial standpoint. Those aren't as great from a community standpoint of what you can go do and try to go build a fan base. When we played in 2018, unfortunately, we thought about coming right back in 2019. We thought some of the feelings might be a little raw with the game being canceled. So our plan was to come back in 2020. That didn't happen. We'll see ultimately whether we get there in 2021. But I think, Mexico City, all of Mexico is a huge opportunity for us, especially with you look at the San Diego market and the NFL now being vacated, and some of those opportunities in Baja itself for Mexico, really being one of the closest teams. There's a ton of fertile ground, but it's going to take a lot of work for us to climb from that 9 and 10 spot into the top 5 and hopefully ascend to, one of those top 1 or 2.
Yeah, and I should mention on the topic of globalization, you're part of an organization which also owns Arsenal in the English Premier League, which is a league that's just hyper local. Obviously, its local market is smaller to begin with, but it's hyper globalized. Arsenal, I'm guessing 8 or 9 out of every 10 fans is outside of the UK, like serious supporters outside of the UK. Are leagues like the three of yours moving in that direction? I mean, you all have these global expansion plans and are gaining some traction. The NFL in Mexico and in the UK. Do you think it's realistic that the day might come where your team and a lot of the big teams in the NFL might have far more fans outside of the US than they do inside the US, as is the case of Arsenal? Or is that just too pie in the sky? I'm just sort of curious.
I think speaking from an NFL perspective, I think different than what Derek and Jason have, our game needs to become more global for us to pick up more international fans, right? People around the world play basketball, they play baseball, they play soccer. Not as many people around the world play football. And so while I think there are plenty of fans of the NFL, I think for the numbers to get to be where they are in the other sports, we're going to have to start to find athletes who play football across the world. I just think that's the game changer and the entree to a greater international viewpoint, especially given, the time zones for when we play are so different worldwide. I mean, we have spent a ton of time looking in Asia as well, but our games are on in the middle of the night in Asia, right? So how do you develop a fan base without people playing? I will say we have gone to the UK and played games in London. We played a number of games there. We've tried to play in Mexico. There are far more people playing football in Mexico than there are in almost any other country. And I was really impressed when we spent time ahead of our Mexico City game in 2018 about how pervasive flag football is growing, in Mexico City, in those markets, and the amount, time people are playing. That's going to be the entree, I think, to growing the fan base internationally, aside from just watching games, and then placing players, into the NFL who come from Mexico, who come from other countries, similar to the way you see globalization help baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, some of those endeavors. But we'll love to make progress. And I think Mexico, because of the flag football element, is a great place to start. And finally, Arsenal had a huge win in Europa League today to get to the round of 16. So for those 9 or 10 people outside of the UK, it's a good day.
I was going to watch it later tonight, but now I don't have to.
Just fast forward to the 87th minute.
Yeah, it's funny. I should say my father played American football in Mexico City years ago in high school at the American school. So you're right. There is this beachhead here, and I'm seeing me on the screen, which means my time is up. And there's so many other things I'd love to ask you guys. And Mariana, we do have to get back to Derek and have him tell us his AMLO anecdotes and why he failed to get AMLO to become a Diamondbacks diehard. But really appreciate you all being here, and I'm gonna listen to the rest of the conversation. Thank you. Thanks, Mia.
Yeah, thank you, Andres. So we wanted to switch the pace up a little bit and do a quick round of rapid fire questions. So the goal here is that Kevin, Derek, and Jason are going to answer these questions in 15 seconds or less, and I'll be timing. So when the alarm goes off, there will be no exceptions. So we'll start with you, Kevin, going first. If you got fired tomorrow, but could then run any other sports organization on the planet, which would you choose?
Definitely not the Suns or the Diamondbacks.
Okay, I don't know if that counts as an answer, but
I would love to run, if I got fired tomorrow, absolutely a European soccer team.
Okay, great. Derek, oh, there's the timer. Derek, what would you say?
I think probably it's probably something international as well. Yet I would look at a league. I think it's a lot of fun watching the expansion of the UFC right now, and I like what they're doing globally. So I would say a prominent role with the UFC and be a part of its expansion.
All right, and Jason?
Cleveland Browns, because I was born in Cleveland. I've been a Browns fan my whole life.
All right. Okay, so Jason, we'll start with you this time. When I say Mexico, you think?
I think Nogales, because I grew up literally 5 miles from Nogales.
Okay. And Kevin?
I think, probably the greatest commercial and economic partner of the city of Los Angeles and all the roads between the two.
Great. And Derek?
I think friendships and family. I've made some wonderful relationships and friends across the border, and I've enjoyed some of the best meals, whether it's, marlin quesadillas at Los Arcos or steaks at Sonora Steakhouse or seafood at Machomos. I love it all.
Great. All right, and then the final question, we'll start with you, Derek. When your team gets badly beaten, what is your consolation?
What is my consolation? I think just our commitment and contributions to the community. Some things you can't control, which is your wins and losses and luck and health and everything. But what you can control is what you're doing in the community and how you treat your fans. And we take great pride in both of those. All
right, very good. And Jason?
For me, it's our employees, because we've had a couple of tough years here, and they've stuck through it with us. And so just knowing how hard they work and the level of dedication they have and the loyalty is something that keeps you moving.
And finally, Kevin?
Derek and Jason had good answers that are probably meaningful. I would say mine is a clean house. When we lose, I come home, I clean out the refrigerator, I do the dishes, I do the laundry. I just compulsively clean until I feel like I've vindicated, a bad day.
That is very funny. And Kevin, I will say this, when we lose, I don't watch highlights. I won't watch any sports highlights. I'll watch the Food Network. So I've become a better cook because of our losses.
Yeah, I refuse to watch Sunday Night Football or any highlights when we lose. I'd like to say that I'm a more gracious winner and wouldn't do it too, but I'll watch everything when we win.
I get it.
When we lose, TV off, house cleaned.
That's awesome.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for humoring us with the rapid fire. And I'm going to hand the microphone over to Mariana now.
Thank you, Mia. Well, as they were both commenting, we will definitely want to hear more about that meeting with our president. But first, as Andres was mentioning, we think of sports as a way to build bridges and to go beyond the differences that two communities can have. In this case, being Arizona and California, the states that you're in, we think about also what people have in common. And for a lot of people, they think of what they left behind or things that they keep, that they are still attached, that maybe they want to teach their children, or they want to communicate something that they used to have in Mexico for a big part of the community. So, and I'm gonna use this example, not only because it's obviously very interesting and we're all eager to know about that meeting, starting with Derek. But we know, for example, that President López Obrador is not very interested in international affairs. He has a very domestic view of things. But when it has to do with sports, it's different, because we all think of sports as a different thing. We all make time to watch sports. I mean, it's an escape, it's a good thing, right? So when we think about that, we don't think about the differences, but about the passion that we share for something. So even we can go back to the meeting that President Lopez Obrador had with President Trump, and the gift was a baseball bat, right? So no matter what the topics were, if it was a challenging moment, in the end, the sports go beyond that. So, I mean, we definitely want to know more about your meeting. We know that you talked about having common projects in the future, but my main question would be, how do you think a president's passion would help the Arizona Diamondbacks with the strategy in Mexico, not only on a market side of things, but on the feeling that he might create within the Mexico community, and that can help transcend those differences that sometimes are very clear, but we may forget when we're talking about sports.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I certainly had no indication of differences when I was with the president. He was so generous with his time. He was such a friendly person and an impressive person. And I will never forget that visit, and will always cherish it. We were supposed to spend about 15 minutes with him and talk about the series and invite him to be with us and sit with us during the series. It ended up being an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. And he took us through the entire palace and gave us a tour. And, you know, we sat and talked about baseball and his memories of baseball and his first pitches, and we laughed about them. And he talked about the 2001 World Series when we beat the Yankees. I also had some former players with me, like Luis Gonzalez, who was our World Series hero, and Rubio Durazo, one of our most popular Mexican players, and Rodrigo Lopez, who works for us as well as the other two. He was so impressive, and he was such a good listener, and he was such a good host. But the sense that I got is he cares deeply about, not only about his people, but he cares about and his country, but he cares about sports, and he cares about youth, and he's trying to find a way where the government can really support the youth and playing of all sports, not just baseball. We focused on youth sports in general, and how we could exchange, how we could work together on that as well, how we could both support each other through the participation of sports and across the border. So I think there's a great deal of opportunity there to really reach out with the olive branch on both ends. But I could not have been happier and more impressed with my visit with him. I'm not so sure we didn't convince him to be Diamondback fan, and I think he was. But it was a wonderful visit. I'll never forget.
Thank you. And do you think, like moving forward, or have you thought about having a specific project? Like you were mentioning about the cooperation you have with Naranjas de Hermosillo, and I know that you also do some things, I mean, not exactly related to baseball, but just of getting engaged with the community. Are you thinking about any specific projects beyond Sonora or in any other part as of today?
Sure. Yeah, I think we could each help each other out on how to develop an academy or multiple academies. We've seen them work throughout the country. When I was with the Dodgers, we had actually built the first academy there in Los Angeles, and it's a all-encompassing baseball academy, but also a school, and it's where children can go and they can learn different aspects of baseball, even if they're not the most talented baseball players, that they could learn sports medicine, or they could learn umpiring, or they can use STEM as a way of bringing baseball into math, science, technology. But you could either have it as a place where students go and live full time and go to school in a boarding situation, or it could be one on weekends. But we talked about the idea of academies, and that it could be both educational and recreational, teaching the sport. And I think that we could both help each other a lot in promoting those academies and the ideas of growing academies throughout the entire country.
That's great. That's very interesting. And talking about academies, if I may switch to you, Jason. You were talking about the importance of connectivity, and we know that from the NBA, I mean, you've done a lot of things on what Andres was mentioning regarding the community there, and you've also had some important stands, like for example, back in 2010 with all the immigration bills, the team was very, I mean, you did a lot of things, a political statement to defend the interests of the community, and then I mean, that also gives this perspective to people both in Arizona, but also in Mexico, and if they have families, that the team is there. So I was wondering if you could share more about how that connectivity is, how that connection between what you do in Arizona impacts people that may have families here, that they know that they might feel threatened by some things that may happen in the political side of things, not only on what has to do with the sport, but knowing that you have a team that has your back and that will be there beyond the game.
Mariana, that's a great question, because there really is, there's no doubting that there is an intersection between sports and politics and certainly issues in society. And for us, and what Mariana is referring to for folks on the call who aren't familiar with it, is Arizona passed a law back in 2009 or so, SB 1070, which for all practical purposes was nothing more than a racial profiling law that allowed police and sheriffs and so forth to pull people over simply by because they looked a certain way, just to kind of boil it down to as simple as you can. And we took a very public stance against that, and at the time wore low suns on our uniforms and took a very public stance about what we felt was a misguided piece of legislation and a misguided law. And at the end of the day, the Hispanic community here in Arizona and in Mexico, just based on the reactions that we received then and received over the years, even when we traveled down to Mexico, people really recognized that, and it resonated with people that we as a professional sports organization were willing to raise our hand and stand up for what we thought was right, rather than taking a backseat and remaining silent on it. It was certainly the right thing to do at the time, and over the years, it's really borne true that we made the right decision back then to really take that stance. And at the end of the day, we've been able to, over the years, continue building on that relationship, and it's that type of a foundation that I think has really helped us continue to have strong connections with the Hispanic community here in Arizona and certainly down in Mexico. So it was one of those things where you knew there was some risks, and we certainly, I'll be really candid about it, we had some fans who were in favor of that law and sent us nasty letters and phone calls saying they were going to cancel their season tickets and this and that. And we basically said, you know what, that's great. If you don't want to do business with us because of our beliefs, then that's your right. But we're going to stand up for what we think is the right thing to do. So, and we still certainly feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, that I feel like that's great because, as you say, people find more than just a sport, and they actually feel like the team is there for them. I'm gonna switch to you, Kevin. I was reading all of these stories about people when the game got canceled back in Mexico City, about how they were actually looking at this as an opportunity. I mean, I was reading this story about, I don't know, like, they were going to take the kids, so they were going to show them the place they lived in because they've been growing up in LA, but the children didn't know Mexico, and it was like a great opportunity for the parents to show them their heritage. So I was going to ask, how is the team doing efforts to, I mean, as Andres was mentioning, LA is a city where, I mean, there are a lot of Mexicans, there's a lot of Latino heritage, they speak Spanish, but in the same line, it's different. Like, it's not the same when you try to show someone where you are from. So we know that that the team is doing efforts, for example, to broadcast the games in Spanish, to have this outreach in order to get to more people and amplify that base. I don't know if you could talk us about the specifics regarding that part of the cultural side of things, of trying to connect people that might be in LA for now for a while, but they are from Mexico City, or they're trying to connect their families.
Yeah, I think we looked at the Mexico City game as a great chance to, connect with our Mexican fan base and really build the bridge between the two cities. And obviously, there is such a strong Latinx population here in Southern California, but at times that gets swept up together, just given the size of the city and 20 million people. And so when you do things like, we were the first team to partner with Univision to do preseason games in Spanish. We have Spanish radio. When you do, all of those things, and I think Derek can attest to his time here in Los Angeles, when you're doing, outreach to the Latin Hispanic community, it is part of your natural everyday life. It's not two separate things here. It is, one outreach to one community, and that's Southern California. What I think was so great about the Mexico City game opportunity was it really distilled it down to people who wanted to come to Mexico City to share those stories, their heritage, to really see the city and the parallels between the Rams, Mexico City, and Los Angeles, just for what it was. That connection, as opposed to a larger Mexican connection, even outside of Mexico City, a larger, Central America, connection. And for that, I think we really enjoyed it. One of the things we did in Mexico City was we built a playground with American Airlines. And part of that was just the partnership. They looked at it and said, that route is one of their most popular. How can they get more engaged, between LA and Mexico City? All of those things, I think, we looked at as true opportunities. We did a ton of meetings with, business councils and people throughout Mexico City who said they spend a ton of time in LA, and trying to build, that relationship and, those bridges together was huge. For us, there are plenty of places you could jump off and go to, certainly throughout Mexico, but that tangential relationship is key, and one we want to build on, especially given, I think one of the things when you look at, from a commerce perspective, a business perspective, people who are headquartered in each city who share those connections, and then obviously people who want to spend time, as you said, and share roots, share history. I think one of the great things about sports, and I'm sure Jason, it's passed down generation to generation. That's what makes fandom. That's what makes people. And so people who grew up, Rams fans here in Southern California, but maybe from Mexico City, first chance, they could come back home and share that love, there. And I think those are the bonds that you want to strengthen and create when you have opportunities, for international series games.
Thank you. And talking about bonds, I'm curious about if you can share just a bit about the binational talent development. If you have that specific strategy in your teams. I know, for example, Jason, the Devin Booker that has Mexican heritage. I mean, those are the things that when we have a clear figure, it might be easier to create a bond. But I don't know if you have any specific thoughts about whether you want to make that topic something important for the team, as to create that talent development that has this combined roots, to say it that way.
Yeah, I could go first. I think it's vital, and we've had so many questions I saw in the chat, Mariana, that asked that question. Is it important for you to have a Mexican-born player? And it is. It's very important. I mean, we're still gonna market our sport. We're gonna market our teams internationally where we have opportunities. And just like the other sports, we're gonna have games that'll be played in England, or games that will be played in Japan and China and India. We all have very similar interests and markets. But when it comes to Mexico, that's the most important market to me, for the obvious reasons, because we are so close. And having been growing up in Los Angeles and a Dodger fan and watching Fernando Mania, there was nothing like it, and then I was fortunate enough to work for the Dodgers when we had Hideo Nomo and Nomo Mania, and we had Chen-Ho Park. And so we dominated Japan, and we dominated Korea, just as the Dodgers did Mexico when they had Fernando. Yet it's very difficult to find that true champion star, from Mexico, but we have to continue to try. And it's become very competitive as a result too. I think clearly all the border states would love to have that Mexican-born star, but I think every team would like to as well. And we know how important baseball is to the country, and how many young, talented athletes play baseball. And so we're going to continue to try and find that player. But it's important for all of us as teams and industries to talk more about our franchise and try and get fans to enjoy our team regardless of Mexican-born player or not. Yet the reality is, if you have that true star from Mexico, it makes all the difference in the world. And yes, we are trying to identify, find, scout, develop that player at all times. We just signed Joaquim Soria. That helps. You know, we heard from a number of Mexican fans that are really excited about that, because they like to be able to say, yeah, we love the fact that you have Latino fans, but it's different that they're from the Dominican or that they're from Venezuela. We want our own, you know, from Mexico to be represented on the Diamondbacks. We understand that, and it's a mission of ours to go find that star, to find that real gem, you know, from Mexico. And we're going to continue to try, but so are other teams, because we all know the importance and significance of having that true star and that true talent from Mexico.
Yeah, from the NBA side, when you think about it just from a pure numbers standpoint, because the fact of the matter is, if you could find a Mexican player to be on an NBA roster, it would be that would just be phenomenal. I mean, the amount of attraction and interest it would generate would, you know, any team would want to have that. And certainly having Devin on our roster is you know, definitely goes in that same direction. Ricky Rubio, although he was from Spain, or is from Spain, as a Spanish speaker, that certainly has some attraction as well. But for the NBA, you know, we basically have 480 active players in any given year, which is, you know, 480 out of 7 billion people in the world is a pretty small number of individuals. So the way we really look at it is, it's up to the NBA and the teams to grow the interest in the game of basketball across, certainly in our own markets, in our own country, but also, you know, across the world and internationally. But I think it's also important for individual countries, if they have the desire to do it, to really, you know, take the sports that they're interested in and try and develop as well. You look at the NBA, and it's at this point right now, with out of those 480 players, about a third of them are international already, primarily coming from Europe. So there is obviously there's a blueprint for how you can do it, but I think it takes a commitment on both sides of the country that's looking to develop the athletes, and then the major leagues that are looking to find these gems, as Derek spoke to, because it's I don't think any one side can really do it. It's going to take both.
And Kevin, I know, you know, this conversation has gone so fast. Sorry to interrupt here. Kevin, I know you have to hop off at the top of the hour. Jason and Derek mentioned that they could stay on for a couple more minutes, but I just want to give the floor to Kevin in case you want to respond to that question, or give any final thoughts before you have to hop off.
Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate. We had Luis Perez with us in 2018, who was the first Mexican-born quarterback, and you know, he was the Division II Player of the Year at Texas A&M Kingsville. You know, I think it's really important, but it has to be authentic, right? The players have to be good enough and be good earned. The teams can't force it. I think both Jason and Derek hit on the head. There's nothing more powerful for any country than to have a homegrown star who goes on to success at, you know, international levels. But I think it has to be for the right reasons, you know, across the board. Where I also think a lot of work can be done, not just on the players, on the executive, on the coaching, you know, on the player personnel side. You know, there are a ton of opportunities there, you know, that really would help as well. And I think those pathways are just as important to work on and develop, you know, across the business sides, you know, and coaching as well, as much as the players. Obviously, the players are a path, but as Jason said, they're 480 NBA players. You know, they're probably 1,500 NFL players, probably similar, you know, to baseball probably has close to 1,000. So, you know, those numbers are really hard. However, there is no height requirement or strength requirement to be a coach, to be in a front office. And I do think there are a ton of opportunities for us to spend more time, you know, in Mexico working on those pathways, which can help lead to greater opportunity and greater interest in the sport. Thank you all very much. I have to, a novel concept here in LA. I have to go pick up my child from school. I didn't even remember we used to have to do that. So thank you all so much for the time.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. I mean, I just want to, from what you said and from what Kevin just said, I mean, it looks like, as we were saying at the beginning, even that can turn into something of binational cooperation, where in the end, it's an interest of both countries to develop something new, to develop this new soft kind of cooperation that goes beyond the tricky topics that nobody wants to talk about. But here it's a win-win situation. And for sure, I mean, Derek, you were mentioning it with on the president's meeting. I mean, it's something that goes beyond any differences, and it's suddenly about sports and about the well-being of the people. So even just looking for that player is something in the interest of both countries.
It is, and we have to make sure that we're not just going there to look for players. I mean, regardless, we need to be a part of that community. So the president and our relationship and our visit in Mexico City is very important. But as we go back to what Andres and I talked about early on with Sonora, you know, we've always had a wonderful relationship going back to, you know, Governor Bors and then Governor Padres and Governor Pavlovich. And I think our Governor Ducey and the governor now in Sonora have as good a relationship as any time. So again, I think it is two-way, and we have to continue to take our players over like the Suns do. We've done it together, and have clinics and help out. Make sure that our gear is there, where kids are wearing our caps and our shirts. And when we do play there, that we can fill the stands with true Diamondback fans. And when they come up here, we let them know how appreciative we are of their support. And we go down there, like I said before, it's reciprocal, and we support them. We support the Naranjeros. That too is a way of reaching across the border and saying we care about you. It's not that we just want to come and find your players to wear our uniform. We want to be a part of your community. We want you to be a part of ours, and we want to help grow the sport together.
Well, I'm seeing Mia and Axel on my screen, so I know that I need to stop. But thank you both. It was great, this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mariana. So I know Axel has a couple slides to share. As I mentioned, one of the things that we were asking you all in the registration process and throughout the conversation was to share your advice for Jason, Derek, and Kevin. And now this is Jason and Derek's chance to get a leg up on Kevin and the NFL and be the exclusive recipients of your advice here. But I'll go ahead and let Axel walk us through some of the responses that we got. I think these are representative of a lot of your ideas in the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Mia. Well, quoting President Damlo, he says we should have always a circular conversation, you know. So we listen to you now. We want you to listen to our public. We gathered so many answers from the public when they made their registration, but we divided some of them in both culture and business group sections. So we have this advice. The first one being that you should create programs where really good athletes or students have an opportunity to study in the U.S. with a scholarship and play in Division I. Maybe you do that already. Well, plan from the beginning with 3 local partners. I'm sure you do. You should appeal to the sense of unity and family, because that's important to Mexicans, and that's truly important for all of us. And well, you might want to make some social projects on behalf of the teams in order to promote your sport, your specific sport in Mexico. So that's the part of community engagement and development. And the other ones are on the business or marketing side. Paula Cheng's and Neri Plan's answers are some sort of similar. That you should study where the fan base is. As you mentioned, you have some big fans on either in Sonora or on border states. So maybe you just need to do awareness campaigns over there, and maybe not in Mexico City. We would like to hear your thoughts about that. And well, Corina has a great point. She says that you should continue using the Spanish slogans, such as Los D-backs. Some uses NBA Suns uses as well as some Spanish slogans or names, so that's really interesting for us. And well, Bernardo said that you should, when the pandemic is over someday, you should organize more meet and greets between players and fans, so we can engage more with the teams and make them even more relevant in Mexico right now.
So we wanted to give you all a chance to reflect on some of the audience feedback. I think you already talked about the ways that plays into your strategy a little bit. But maybe Jason, you want to start off?
A lot of great points there, and what you see more than anything is the interest and the passion, and that's kind of what sports is all about, right? Is people being interested in making those connections and feeling that sense of community and unity that sports really does create. I do think that the one that's striking to me is the idea of whether it's Los Diamondbacks, Los Suns, the speaking in the language of the people that you're trying to connect with, I think is a really important point. That you want to try and be as authentic as you can, and you want those connections to be real and deep and meaningful. And I think the way you do that is through communicating in a way that people can relate to and connect with. So those are definitely important things. And look, the idea of trying to take younger athletes who have potential and taking steps, which all of our organizations do a great job doing. We certainly, I know the Diamondbacks do a terrific job with their youth programs here in Arizona and across the state, and their efforts down in Mexico as well. We've done the same with clinics down in Nogales and Hermosillo and Mexico City, both on our own and with the NBA. So those types of continued programs, and even if you're just reaching out and connecting with individual groups at a time, over time that builds. You know, you have a young person who has a connection with the Diamondbacks or had some interaction with the Suns down in Hermosillo, they're going to remember that for the rest of their lives. And when they have their own children, they're going to impart that, and they're going to create that fandom, because fandom really is a multi-generational thing. And so the more people we can connect with at a younger age, I think the better we're all off going to be in terms of making those lasting relationships.
I think that's great. And Derek, anything you want to add there? Any final words?
Sure. No, I appreciate it. You know, I look back, I'll tie in something that was said, you know, when it comes to the Los D-backs and Los Suns, to something that Jason said. And I was so proud of his organization and the stance they took politically. We had something very similar the first time, and we were the first team, major league team, I believe, that wore the Los, and we wore Los D-backs. And after we had our first game wearing Los D-backs, I had a season ticket holder write me an email that night saying how wrong it was that we're the Diamondbacks, we're the D-backs, not Los D-backs, and we should never wear the uniform again. Just like the Suns, we took a strong stance. And I remember telling him that night, with that attitude and his feelings, I did not want him to be a season ticket holder of ours anymore, and that we were sending his money back. And he said, no, I still want to be a season ticket holder. And I said, no, we don't want you to be. And we gave him his money back, made him take his money back. And that's how important this is to us. And, you know, it is genuine, it is real. And knowing that we look for alternative jerseys, and how important wearing Los is on our uniform, to make sure that each year we do have that uniform as one of our alternate jerseys, and that it is scheduled to be in the rotation. And in addition to that, we look at other uniforms and alternate uniforms, and we always want to use, you know, we want to use Spanish as much as possible. We look at, does it make sense to be serpientes, you know, so that we can have that connection. This is a very important population, you know, especially here in Arizona, where you look at 40% of our fan base is Latino. And so, you know, that is so important to us, and it is a big part of who we are. In addition to that, the word family came out again. And Mia, you had asked me earlier, and when I think of Mexico, family is Mexico. And I'm so impressed with the family values of all my friends and, you know, those relationships I've created in Mexico. And Jason and I have very similar organizations. We care about families. We care about a family presentation, and something that families of all ages, of all backgrounds would come see our games and they would feel good about, they'd be proud of. And we have the family sports. You know, when you look at soccer, I think is one as well. When you look at MLB and NBA, those are family sports where you can sit with your family and you could teach the game and you could hand it down from generation to generation. That is something that is the same in Mexico and in the United States, in Arizona and in Sonora. And we have to make sure that we both teach the game the same way, make sure that there's still strong participation, and that we celebrate it together.
Thank you so much, Derek and Jason. I think, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, but I want to thank all of you so much for joining us as audience members, for lending your time and advice, and of course, immense gratitude to Kevin, Derek, and Jason for being here, and also to Mariana and Andres for guiding such a fun and informative conversation. I know at Convergence Lab, PJCOMEXI, and the Arizona Mexico Commission, we're committed to continuing these conversations, and we hope you'll continue to join us. And so to stay up to date on future events, the best way is to follow us on Twitter at ASU_MX is Convergence Lab, at PJCOMEXI is PJCOMEXI, and at AZMXCOM is the Arizona Mexico Commission. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.